Welcome to our webcast, A3 Reports, Polishing the Elevator Speech. I'm Larry Goldman, Vice President of Marketing for MoreSteam.com and the moderator of today's webcast. As always, we're recording this presentation and make it and the slides available for free on the MoreSteam website. This is a re-recording of the webcast that we did on October 31st with better sound quality. So here is our agenda. After a brief introduction, we'll spend most of our time focused on the presentation. We're going to stop halfway through, and we'll address some of the questions that were asked during the live session, and we'll also stop at the end and address some questions then as well. Your host, MoreSteam.com, is the leading provider of online Lean Six Sigma and process improvement training and technology. Since the year 2000, we've trained over 375,000 professionals in all levels of online belt training and certification, including our 18-hour Lean Methods class, now available in English, German, Portuguese, Chinese, and Spanish, and our Master Black Belt training, which covers advanced Lean topics and is jointly offered with The Ohio State University. MoreSteam trains individuals and works as a partner with training programs of process improvement deployments. For large training initiatives, we provide a variety of software as a service tools and online courses, including over 250 hours of modular lessons, foreign language training, interactive classroom project simulations, and online testing and project management. MoreSteam proudly supports some of the largest existing blended learning process excellence programs in the world. To learn more about what we offer, visit our website. Now on to our presentation. I think it's worth noting, for those of you who are new to this educational webcast series, that whether our monthly topic is a grand theme, such as change management, or a more tactical skill like negotiation or coaching, we always aim to do two things. The first is to make it compelling and worth your time, and the second is to make sure that it's practical, that you can use some of this information in your work. So today, we'll easily realize both of those goals with our guest speaker and our topic, the A3 report. A tremendously useful Lean tool, the A3, when used correctly, helps you to identify and communicate critical project information and to facilitate business decision-making. While the A3 has been widely adopted for project tollgate reviews, and you may be familiar with it to some extent, many organizations are still finding that getting belts to internalize what you could call A3 thinking can be a formidable challenge. We'll address that in our webcast today. Our speaker today, Chamberlain, has extensive experience with and a deep respect for the advantages of agreeing to share your wisdom on
and the like. Additionally, we have Clopay building products, which is well known for their garage doors and their man doors. Ames True Temper, which does designs and builds innovative landscape tools. And Telephonics, which does advanced information and communication systems. To begin with, I wanted to share a quote from Mr. John Shook from his book Managing to Learn, and the part that I found so very important about this was that first half. A3 reports should become a standardized form of currency for problem solving, for dialogue, and for decision making. What's very important about that is it has two functions, not only as a way of sharing information from one organization to another, or from an employee to a boss, or from a one facility to the other dealing with the same issue, but it is a way of thinking It's a systematic way of thinking. It falls right in line with the DMAIC process that so many of us work with, that forces the very thoughtful approach to taking a problem and turning it into a very approachable tactical goal. And we'll talk a lot about that with A3Xs and how they fit into A3s. But I think that first sentence is terribly important. It's a two-piece program or effort. So is it a tool or a process? It is both. As a management process, it is a wonderful way to communicate. It is a way, and part of the title of this presentation is the elevator speech. In one sheet of paper, and I'll describe it here in a little bit, one sheet of paper, in 2 minutes, you can describe a project that is a week worth of work or a year's worth of work. All of our black belts, every project they do has an A3 format. Recently, I saw what I'm sure was a very good green belt project. Somebody was trying to demonstrate their green belt effort that they had done, and I'm sure it was excellent and interesting. And I got through about 3 of the 60-some slides that they sent me. Nobody's going to go through 60 slides. The A3X gives you one sheet. It takes you from what the problem statement is down to the bottom left-hand side, which describes very clearly what the goal is. You start back at the upper right-hand side, you analyze it, and you end up in the lower right-hand side with a very clear action plan or completed actions. So if it's completed, it'll say completed, and if it's not, it'll leave a person and a responsibility and when something is due. The problem-solving side, this is the part I think that gets lost so often. That's hugely valuable as well. We have to take a problem that somebody brings to us and somehow write it down in a way that it's measurable, that it's approachable, that we agree to it. Think about many of the problems, the problem statements you write, and how very difficult, now very often, you write the problem statement and the solution in the same sentence. We shall eliminate scrap in the wire drawing department by improving our die selection. There's the question and the answer. And the nice thing about that, you have the answer right away, is you'll get a chance to do it again. Because if that was the answer, you would have already done it. The reason you're doing a project is because you don't know the answer. And the A3 should help focus your mind on getting to the right problem. Problems, solutions are not really the difficult part of this. It's the question that's difficult. So to begin. Larry, did you mind, I know we did some polling. This is an opportunity to discuss a little bit about what our audience, what in general people were seeing with regards to how familiar people are with A3s and A3Xs. From my notes, about 39% of the people use A3, or do not use A3s. 55% use them somewhat, and 6% use them all the time. And Clopay is falling in that 6%, and we really find it terrifically valuable. One of the questions I was asked not that long ago is, when do you use an A3? My response to that is, if it's a project worth doing, it needs an A3. If it's a just go do it, then just go do it, and don't make it an A3. But that's not what we really do for the most part. There's not too many one-off answers anymore. So most projects deserve an A3. Some are very, very large, a year's worth of work, or many projects that fall from underneath it. Some are very, very small and very approachable. A3s have different sizes and shapes, and depending on your preference or the style that you use, can be very applicable to different industries or different approaches to the same problem. The second half here, and this one I also found interesting, was, does your organization use an A3X report? Interestingly, 7% do. 12% do not. I'm sorry, 7% are familiar with it. 12% are not. 81% are not familiar with the A3X at all, which took me back. I suppose it's one of those things, when you've heard it a few times and you get involved, you think everybody's involved. I'm going to show you the A3X and how we use it. To begin with, the A3X, it's also known as an X matrix. If you look at the book, the Hoshin Connery for the Lean Enterprises, Mr. Jackson here, he shows you an A3X, an X matrix. And if you see it, if you start on the left-hand side, you go from strategies to results to process to tactics. Those are the terms and terminology that are used in the X matrix. Very, very similar to what we call an A3X. A3Xs have more than just those 4 branches, and we'll connect those in a moment. It also has some interaction plots, and you can see how pieces fit together. Are they strong relationships, or weak relationships, or no relationship at all? The X matrix can also be used very well to bundle A3s together. Helps us with our interdependencies, and it connects us to the bottom line results. Because we start in strategies, we end up with tactics. Or, let me show you Clopay's. You get something like this. Oh my goodness. There's a lot happening there. So I'm going to take you to an Excel version of this just so we can move around. And as you see here, our A3X has slightly different words than the X matrix. We use objectives, measures and targets, action programs, and action items. Objectives. Objectives are strategic things. Something that somebody says, your department shall, your plant shall, your personal goals are objectives. By the time we walk around in this circle, we'll end up with, in order for me to meet my plant objectives, I will do the following several things. And then we'll attach those to A3s. So we can take strategic objectives and turn them into actionable tactical items. What we've done here is we've added some colors to make things a little easier to trace. And if you see, we have, please don't get too hung up on the words in there. I made these up for this example. But world-class safety record for 2012. What are the measures and targets? What are we looking for? Well, we're looking for a decrease in the number of hand safety incidences by 50% and a reduced fork truck incidences by some percent. My imagination didn't allow me to get all the percentages in. That leads us into action programs. Well, we are going to gather the appropriate people together, and we're going to focus a team on hand safety. We are going to contact some professional organizations and find out how they handle fork truck issues. And those lead to action items. So you've said what we want to get to, and you've got a pretty good idea of who we're going to do, but what are you going to actually do? What is the tactical part? What parts can we touch? That's where we do our action items. Develop a plan to increase the use of PPE. That'll connect to some, we'll hyperlink that to something. But mostly, if you look at ours, they connect to A3s. There's a hearing prevention A3. You connect on this, it'll take us off to the A3. And here is how we are going to deliver the hearing loss prevention improvement, which should be part of this assembly here, the assembled hearing loss prevention team, which will go back to decreasing the decibel levels, which will go back and deliver the objective that we were given in the first place, which is world-class safety record for 2012. So forgive me, I'll go back to our presentation. And this is just me trying to show you the colors. If you don't like colors, use shapes, use something different. This is Clopay's version of this. To be completely fair, the mechanics of this are done through an Excel spreadsheet developed by a company called Systems to Win. It was very good, and it got us an awful long way. We've adjusted it to our liking a bit, but it's like anything else. You have to tailor it to your organization, and your organization may or may not appreciate ours. But visualize this being posted in the war room, and when you're asked, what are you doing and why, being able to connect everything together. So onward, objectives. We have objectives, measures and targets, action programs, and action items. This to me is the most exciting part of the A3X, from strategic, hey, here's what I want to happen in the next coming 6 months or a year, to, oh, here's how I'm delivering what you've asked for. So our objectives, and remember, we bring ours by color. World-class safety record for 2012. Comfortably leads us into something measurable. Decreased number of hand safety incidents by 50%. That's very measurable. Reduce the fork truck incidences by X%. And into the action program. We are going to use a team for this one. We are assigning it to Billy Bob. We are going out for external training. We are hiring a contractor. All those things are delivers back to those objectives. Before we go on, Larry, were there any questions about A3Xs? And then we'll talk about A3Xs and A3s, how they connect.
Sure. Thanks, Troy. That's great. We did get a number of questions in at this point around the A3X, so I thought we'd repeat these because they're excellent questions and certainly give you a chance to talk about Clopay's take on these and what you know about them. The first question was, how do you make sure that the A3X is related to the corporate business strategy and not the lean department strategy?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because as we all know, we can muddle up anything that has connections like this. The objective and the focus of the A3X is to force you to make those, as I connected those lines in color, is to force you into that thinking in a step-by-step portion. Those original objectives that come from on the left-hand side had to come from someplace. And we're just trying to make sure that by the time we get to the actionable item, we can feed back to that. If the lean department is the one that's setting the objective, well, then it's the lean department's A3X, and that may be fine. But is it delivering what the company's goals and objectives are? It won't be able to connect.
Mm. Yeah, and that'll become obvious through the A3X.
Yes, yes. If you cannot draw the lines, and in our case it was colors, if you cannot make the colors match up, then you're disconnected somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Okay, second question was, at Clopay's process, does the executive team use the A3X to structure the company-wide strategy for each year?
Yes and no. It's a matter of degree. Operations has a tendency, just like most of the Lean Six Sigma type projects, seem to be the one that drive in, and so operations is the most developed. But those goals and objectives and the strategy for developing those and then supplying those down through the food chain, whether or not it's operations or sales or whatever, is done through an A3X thinking. It's not as colorful and as broad. It's simpler, but it is still the same mechanics that are used.
Okay. How successful has Clopay been at having your management adhere to the A3X? And an example would be, do projects occur for your team that never made their way into the A3X planning sessions?
Boy, I would love to say you absolutely not. No, but that's not the truth. The world's still a very complicated place, and we are working these processes up the food chain and down the food chain. Our management is open-minded and approachable and engaged, but there's still many personalities involved in these things. So it doesn't happen on the first day, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and one last question, from me, actually, just listening to you today is, I see the A3X and I think, okay, project planning and tracking tool, but it's different. It's a different take on that. I mean, do you use a traditional project tracking tool as well, or how do you get people that maybe might in their own business be using one of those to think more around using an A3X?
Well, yes, we have some very good project tracking tools that are actionable. We have a Gantt chart, for example, with all the different things and all the responsibilities. That is getting into how do you go about making something happen. The point of the A3X is to take that strategic thing, that very soft but very important thing, and turn it into someplace where you can use a detailed project management tool because now you know what the project is. I mentioned it earlier that it's not the answers that are hard, it's the questions. And we're trying to take that left hand, the A3X does a nice job of taking that rather broad strategic objective and turn it into an actionable item, which we can use project management tools with.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Our A3s are also used in that manner. We manage projects using A3s.
Excellent. Well, let's continue on.
Okay, very good. All right, an A3. That is Clopay's A3. This was this particular one was developed by Mr. Vance Green, who's our Director of North American Operations. And what he's done is he's taken the A3 form And he's put these little yellow boxes in there that describe each of the sections of the A3, what you should see in there, some tips, this is the sort of place that you should, what kind of information should be in there, and some warnings. Please do not do this or watch out for that. Make your own. Make one that fits your dialogue. Make one that fits your culture. This one works quite well for us. There's different ways of approaching it, and there's different ways of formatting it so that it reaches your audience better. This is our A3 form, and I'm going to show you examples of as we're using it as we're going through. But what is an A3? An A3 is a sheet of paper. It happens to be the size of a sheet of paper. There's A2s and A4s as well. A3 is an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. That sounds like a big piece of paper when you think of it as just that. But when you realize you're going to put a year's worth of work on it, it can be kind of intimidating, very, very small. It'll frighten you how small it is. But it is the size that we use. It's also, A3s are a standard way of telling a story. We always know, if you pick up any of our A3s, the upper left-hand corner is going to tell you what the title is. The lower left-hand corner will tell you what the goals and objectives are. And the lower right-hand corner will tell you where we are in this project. Most of the way through, finished, complete, who's responsible for it, timelines, whatever it is. But that left-hand side is so very, very important. We'll spend some time there. It's so very important, and every A3 you pick up is going to look the same. It's a standard way of communicating. Mr. Shook mentioned that earlier. The visual documentation of the problem-solving thought process. That sounds silly, but that is so incredibly important. What we're doing is walking ourselves through taking a project from a title to a goal, and we're doing it in our mind, and we're using our pencil, and we are showing our work. We went from setting our title to developing what our background is, to going into our current conditions, to developing what our problem is. You can see it step by step coming down the left side. We'll go through that in a lot of detail here in a minute. The other thing that was very important is when you get to that lower left-hand corner and say, from this information, from the decisions I've made, and as I've demonstrated here on the left-hand side, this is what I'm working on, and this is what I'm going to go get. And that's signed off by the champion or the manager for the A3 or whatever. There's no lack of clarity here now about what we should be working on. There's no question. Doesn't mean that as we start to do analysis, we find or learn things that we don't have to go back and reconsider the left side of our A3, the development side of it. But there's never going to be a confusion about, am I working on the right thing, or do you think I'm working on something and I think you're working on something different? And it's also a great way for us it's a approval process. When we hit certain milestones, we can say, yes, we agree, we all are on page. In Clopay, every Thursday, there's an A3 review. You sit down with the managers, and they go through, not all of them, but there's usually 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 running around at any particular time, but you go through a couple of them, and it's the opportunity for that team to say, okay, here's what we're doing, and get a dialogue. It's not an opportunity to be critical of everything they've ever done. It's a chance for us to discuss what we're seeing, what we're learning, and it's a single sheet of paper where we can discuss an entire project without going through 60 slides of a Greenbelt project, for example. Here's an example. Many of us, again, are Lean Six Sigma practitioners, and we think in DMAIC. Here's how DMAIC fits in there. This happens to be an A3 I've made actually a couple of years ago now. And it's not even a very good one. It's not nearly visual enough. That's the challenge, is always to make it more and more visual. Make it so that there's fewer and fewer words and people can get it's intuitive. But the point I wanted to show you here is our DMAIC process fits in the left-hand side is define and measure, and the right-hand side is the analyze, improve, control. The defining and the measurements that you establish in a project, I believe many of us will agree, are the key portion. Because once you've established what the problem is, once you've defined it very well, and you have some way of measuring it, now it's a matter of applying our very substantial tools, our very capable people, and our very capable hands and minds to resolving it. We can do that, but we have to have that left side established well. And that's where you often hear me talk about the left side of the A3 and the right side of the A3. Define and measure is on the left. So let's begin. Define and measure what? We often, and I mentioned earlier too, that we often go and we write what our problem statement is and immediately write what our problem's answer is too. And some of that is because we've just been doing it that long. Some of it is we think we really know the answer. Some of it is that tribal knowledge, and we all know the tribal knowledge. The unfortunate part is many times the projects that we're working on, by the time they get to us where we have to really struggle our way through them, are problems that have been thorny or have been nagging. And the reason they are is because we've already known the answer so many other times, we've never really gotten down to it. So the A3 process forces you to do the following steps. We establish the title, just the name of the project. Our project is going to be reduce rubber rollware. Let's, whatever. Reduce the number of return authorizations, whatever your industry may ask. That's the objective. Sometimes those titles can be huge. Solve world hunger, or completely improve the first pass yield of an entire organization. Big projects, and I will show you how we deal with those here in a moment. But we have a title. We have a place to start. From there, it's a background. You're dealing with different departments. You're dealing with different people. Sometimes you're dealing with different industry. Here's a chance to say, hey, what we are talking about is a wire drawing process. This should be the easy part, yes? Typically it's not, because we don't really care what you think. We don't care what your buddy thinks either. Nor do we care what the historical experience was. It's important, but it's not the only thing. Nor do we want to know the best financial report you've ever seen. We want to know what you know. And can you put your finger on it? Can you be sure? Have you gone to Gemba? Gemba is not typically at your desk. It's very rarely at your desk. Have you gone to where the condition is and seen it, touched it, felt it, and know that you have got the right one? What do you know? That's probably the most difficult part of this left-hand side. After that, now that you've looked at what you know, I see that this machine has the highest scrap. I see that this department has the lowest yield, or this one has the biggest turnover. Now you can start to write what the problem is. What's important, though, is you got to keep going back to the top. Does my title fit in with my background? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Does my background and my current conditions, do they know each other? Yes. All right. When I set my problem statement, let me start back at the top, and I'll read. Does my title roll into my background, roll into my current condition, roll into my problem statement? You will hurt your feelings when you start to realize the number of times you write down problem statements that had nothing to do with your title. It's human nature to drive our minds to a place where we know the problem is. But that may not have been what the question was. So go back, make sure the title leads to the background, leads to the current conditions. If you find out that the problem statement that you really, really want has nothing to do with the title, then start over and change your title. Don't force it. Make sure that it's linear and that they fit together. And once you have the problem statement done, setting the goals and targets are the easy part. I will make a 50% improvement. I will make it industry standard. I will make it improved by industry standard by 10%, or it'll be the best department, whatever it may be. Set the objective. Be very, very clear. Make it measurable. Make it with time. By June, by tomorrow, by 50%, by bill. Okay. What does it deliver? It delivers for us clear, measurable projects developed from data. It gives us a project tracking mechanism. I've already explained how that left-hand side leads to a wonderful way to communicate what the problem is. It's a single communication method. We all use the same one. Every time you pick it up, you know what to expect. Okay. What does it cost? Doesn't sound like much, but it is painful for many of us to be this disciplined at the front end. it takes a lot of discipline to make sure that you're going very slow and doing this title to background, background to current, title to background to current. You have to be willing to let the data decide. We all do it at one point or another. Yes, but once you start the yeah buts, the yes buts, the I know better than my data, we're making a mistake. We're steering it by our inclination or our preferences, not by the data. And watch when it happens. You'll see it in the project happening. Yeah, but no, let the data do it. And it takes patience. You don't do the left-hand side of an A3 in an hour. Sometimes you don't do it in 2 weeks, particularly if you've got a contentious group of people that don't all agree. The data is what will anchor us all. If we all can agree on the data, we can make the decisions from that. If we're very, very disciplined about the left-hand side of our A3, we end up with a very clear project and a very measurable goal. And now it's actionable. Now it gets simple. The saying in Clopay is, you must go slow in the beginning to go fast at the end. Because if you define the right question, the right problem, and you set the proper goals, now you can apply your strong resources to delivering those. And then it goes very, very fast. So do your work up front. Next part. Focus on the problem, not the format. We have a tendency of getting so very excited about making things dynamic and colorful and bright. And we have these wonderful software packages. But sometimes we get so detailed into those things, we forget that we're actually trying to get down to a problem. This, to me, is a wonderful A3. It's done by hand. All my black belts have to do their A3s by hand. Later on, when they're presenting up the food chain and they're getting their pass, their measure and analyze, yeah, they can go ahead and start to make some of this digital. But I don't want them spending all their time struggling to figure out how to get that graph just so, or the colors just so, or the font. That's not what's important here. Don't discount the value of taking your pencil and sitting at a piece of paper and walking through it and not worrying about the computer. Just worrying about what it is that you're writing and what you're hearing and the data that you're collecting and what you're writing down there. The gentleman that did this one did not spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to get a truck icon. Nor did he spend a lot of time about figuring out how he's going to make that the parts that were important stand out. He took a red marker, he drew around it. And then when he found something he liked, he put green marks through it. That was what was important here. This example it was a working document that was used by a team to come up with first the left-hand side. Well, they kept going. They did it on the right-hand side too by pencil. After you've worked on it for a while, sure, you can make it pretty. There's lots of neat ways to do graphics and things, and sometimes this is a very nice way to communicate a project. You've invested enough time in it. It's a wonderful way to be able to put it in front of a larger audience. Not everybody can read your handwriting, sir, but you know the truth is that the real value of this left-hand side is by doing it by hand, forcing the people to work on the issues and the information, not the formatting and the computer program we have. I can't stress that enough. Most people won't really believe it until you sit down and try it. And I would encourage you to read some of the books I've mentioned, and they will also stress the importance of taking all the wonderful tools we have out of the equation and letting our minds get involved in it. Do you remember what I was talking a moment ago about sometimes these projects come out very, very large? The example I'm going to use here is we have a project that says increase the first pass yield for the entire department. Well, we all know that that's probably a very big project. Now, we call that a mother A3. That project, when you start to dig in, you get the left-hand side, and you say, well, yeah, there's the opportunities, and you start to do the analysis, you'll find out that there's 2 machines that are the highest first pass yield impact machines. We call those daughters. So our mother, to improve very nice A3 to do a SMET event on an A3. It's got a very clear beginning and a very clear end. But I also have a significant, I don't know what it is, scrap issue related to something. I may say develop a whole A3 on just a piece of that. But look what ends up happening. My daughter A3 leads up to my granddaughter A3 leads up to my daughter A3. My daughter A3 leads up to my mother A3. My mother A3 is that large objective that may have come out of our A3X. It's connected, the whole thing. Or another way to look at it is this way. The top part is the green A3X. We have the strategic goals that came from a high. We bring them into our organization, whether or not it's a department or it's a plant or it's a company. And we go around that circle starting with our objectives, and we end up with, going through our measures, our action programs, we end up with action items. Action items are still pretty broad words. We need some way to control them, so we begin an A3. And that A3 leads to daughter A3s and sometimes granddaughter A3s. But if I had all that whole A3X and all the action items, and I had all the A3s that went with it underneath here, I can show you at any particular time when somebody says, what are you doing about delivering the strategic goals of this department, plant, organization, whatever, you can very clearly say, here are the tactical things I am doing to deliver those strategic goals. It's linear, it's connected. And maybe I get the first daughter A3 done, but I'm having struggles with the second one. Okay, I'm not getting every, but my second set of action items has these other daughters that I'll be working on. When you come into the organization and say, what have you done for me lately? I've got A3s that I can put right down in front of you, one right after the other, or put up on a screen in front of you, and says, here's what I have done, and here's how the problem developed, and here's how where we are in the process, and here are the resolution to issues, and that ties right back to our very strategic goals. I obviously am very excited about this. I really like the fact that we can connect a strategic objective that may or may not be tied to a mechanical or a very tangible item, and we can connect the two using this process. Now, don't take my word for it alone. There's many resources. We use many, and we're not afraid to borrow even more. But here's some of the ones: Managing to Learn, the Hoshi Conray, the MoreSteam training, the Ohio State University Systems to Win, all excellent. The Lean Enterprise, full of this. I'm afraid to not mention everybody because we use a little bit from everybody, and we develop it and make it fit our organization. The process of taking a strategic goal and turning it into a deliverable item is what most of us are tasked with daily. And this A3X to A3 is the mechanism that Clopay uses, and we find it quite successful. I think we are back to you, Larry.
All right, thanks, Tor. That was great. That was excellent. As I said before, we have a number of questions that came from our live session that I wanted to ask you again, because I think they're great and they address certainly the specific concerns of individuals out there. Before I do that, a real quick question for you is, so you pointed to those references before. I know that people are probably interested in the A3X as well, and you had that one reference on the earlier slide. The ones that you mentioned, is there anyone in particular, if somebody wanted to just focus, let's say they do A3s and they wanted to focus on the A3X, is there something you might suggest?
The Hoshi Conray is very good for that, and I really like taking the systems to win mechanics. I found that to be a tremendous way of forcing my mind through the steps. I really thought that was very good.
Oh, that's great. Okay. All right, so here's some questions then. First question, looks like a lot of similarity between traditional project charters and the A3. Have you stopped using project charters at Clopay?
Yes, for the most part. A3s not only deliver us the same information that a project charter will, and there are other mechanisms out there that will. There's other mechanisms out there that you can track projects. The A3 brings us something else. It brings us a way of developing down to an actionable item, that lower left-hand corner. And I haven't run across many things that do that. It hits both. It's a single way to communicate, Very, very presentable. It's a little awkward sometimes, depending on how you kind of equipment you're using. But it's consistent. It's very charter-like with the right kind of information, but it has that mechanism from helping you drive down to the right problem.
Okay. Would you say that there's a difference between a one-pager and an A3?
Yes, because again, the A3 has that effort, that process of getting down to the actionable items. And most of the one-pagers, for example, very great, wonderful way of communicating something, but doesn't force that mindset of walking step by step down from the problem statement to a problem statement.
Sure. Yeah, the development piece is critical. You know, you talked about using it as the key a number of times as the key communication tool. In black belt projects, for example, do they have supplemental materials that they also put through, or do you really keep them down to the A3?
The A3, and the way I say it to them is, I don't really care to hear the roar of the cannons. I just want to see the holes in the target. I know there had to be a roar to get that hole. That's their job, and as their mentor, I want to see that, and I spend time looking at that, and I look in great detail about how they got there. But when they're trying to communicate what they've done or how they've done it, their audience does not need all that detail. I will not allow a link of an A3, for example. If you cannot do it in the A3, then you are not being concise enough in your thinking and your presentation. And let's face it, that's a very important part of the DMAIC process, being able to communicate what you've learned.
Do people, maybe even new employees, do they accept that from you, or do you ever get pushback?
Well, sure. They wouldn't be challenged to be in the a black belt or in the program unless they had the kind of minds to push back. I haven't had an argument that's been able to sway me from my thinking, though. Yes, I want them to do those things, and that is their job. If they need to be able to explain to everybody they meet exactly how they did it, then why do we really need them doing it? All those other people could do it instead. Again, it's the roar of the cannons, the holes in the target. We want to see the deliverable action items.
Sure. So in terms of developing it, how long does the A3 process usually take?
It varies a great deal by person and project. The A3s that we use in our black belt projects, because of the training and all that, it might take 2 months before you get the left-hand side, because the people are learning and they're gathering data and they're reading all the DMAIC stuff. Or you could sit down in the right room with the right few people, and in 3-4 hours you can have the whole left-hand side of that A3 buckled up tight and clean. But you better be able to go to Gimbal and get your data, make sure that you've got good information going on there. Then, of course, the right-hand side, that's the analysis and the improvement side. That depends on your process or your project and what you can get accomplished.
Sure.
I've seen them take hours, and I've seen them take weeks.
In terms of the pervasiveness of the use of A3s, we had a question, I don't know if you remember this, but somebody was very curious to know if the operators or someone at the shop floor level was using this rather than just, say, the belts or the leaders.
Optimally, the operator is the perfect person. I have a problem. The title of my problem is, and they walk through this process, including they do the analysis and everything on the right-hand side. When they get done with dealing with that problem, they've got a problem. It's very clear where they got to, an objective, and a solution, and that's the best. I don't think we're that mature that we can do that with operators yet. And it won't be for lack of trying. Supervisors, to some degree, more often than not, process or engineering or organization, further up the organization. But it has more to do with exposure and training than any skill set. Operators are very capable. Who knows it better?
In terms of the left side of the A3, how do you ensure? What do you do to make sure that these people, that your guys go slowly?
Well, I mentioned that one of the things we do is we have these Thursday meetings. It can be difficult to stand there in front of that group when you have holes in your arguments. Everybody understands the importance of being able to connect that title to that problem statement, and the data has to be legitimate. It takes a lot of discipline, and the way we ensure it is with exposure, talking to each other, and being able to present it, having to present it.
Good. Here's a question that someone asked. If you remember this one, you know, one of the issues that always comes around process improvement or lean projects are, you know, the sustainability of it, to avoiding the sliding back of performance afterwards. Is there anything in particular about the A3 that you found is helpful, maybe more helpful than other tools to combat that or support that sustainability and combat the backsliding, potential backsliding?
It's two pieces, and it's a little bit of discipline. The A3s are wonderful to communicate and put in your war room or your area, and you can put it up there. People can walk up and they can see where you are. Because we keep it visual and color coded, you can also demonstrate the life of the project, where we are, and it's not hard to go in there and check on the progress. So it's wonderful for that way. But what do you do when you get to the end of it? How do you keep, you know, those improvements that you've made from no longer being improvements? How do you do the sustain part of the 5S? How do you do the control part of DMAIC? We can collect those up and have a little A3 of collected miscellaneous items. What would they call it? Papri type of you know, A3. It sounds silly, but it's a way of keeping that in front of people all the time. Hey, these are not done yet. And by the way, your name's next to it. And you said you'd have it done on Tuesday, or you'd have it done in July. And that way we can get them all cleaned up.
Nice. Good. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Here's maybe a bigger question, just a couple more. What challenges did you experience in implementing the A3s across Clopay, and how did you overcome them?
The challenge is it's very difficult for people not to want to show everything. I told you about the 60 slides from a Greenbelt project. People are very, very excited about the things they do, and we can be very proud of what they've done. It's hard to make people understand that we believe them. They've done the 59 slides in between. What we're really interested in is that last piece. So it's part of that's attention and caring and helping people understand that we respect the job, right? I forgot the second half of what I was going to say there,
well,
Larry.
How did you overcome these kinds of issues?
Well, persistence, and that fortunately that persistence comes for us came out of North American operations, pressing it all the time, trying to keep the discipline there. And now we train everybody, every process person, every salesperson, every new black belt understands and has to communicate through A3s. What's really kind of exciting though is we've been doing it enough, and our projects have been successful enough, and they've gotten enough exposure that our upper management, it's become an expectation. It's became a, as Mr. Shook said, it's a currency of communication. And now, as that gets healthier and that currency becomes more valuable, it becomes less and less of a problem of keeping that discipline. Okay. I've seen the same A3 be presented in that Thursday meeting, presented in a black belt final presentation, and presented to the CEO of the company, all within the same week.
That's great. Yeah. Final question. So here's from somebody who is guilty, by the way, of one of the 60 pagers. They say they've used DMAIC storyboards, and they're considering using A3 reports. Is it okay to switch to an A3 without first implementing A3X?
Yes. Yes. It's nice to think if you could do it from the left to the right, from the A3X down to the A3s, but boy, the A3 is such a win. It's such a way of control and such a clean way of communicating. And frankly, that's where we started too. We got into A3s. We got them under control. We learned how to use them. We started applying. We realized, wait a minute, there's a bunch of these things going on. We can't always explain how they tie back to the original goals. The A3X came in and tied it all together nicely for us. But absolutely, take the A3 every day.
All right. Well, thank you so much for answering all these questions. We do appreciate this, your time, Tor, and your sharing the whole Clopay A3X and A3 experience. A few last items I have here. If you're interested in advanced lean topics, perhaps it's time you consider the Master Black Belt training that's offered by MoreSteam and the Fisher College of Business at The Ohio State University. It's a joint program that you can start at any time. It includes 4 weeks of training, 2 online through the MoreSteam portal, 2 live at the OSU campus in Columbus, Ohio. And we do cover advanced lean topics amongst many other topics: negotiation, leadership, advanced statistics, the things that Master Black Belts need to know and need to be tested on. We'll be uploading this recorded presentation as well as the slides and to the website. Our next webcast takes place on November 28th. Neil McAteesh of Raytheon will discuss things your teacher never told you about test optimization. Register today and be sure to join us. This concludes our webcast. Thanks for attending.